The first time I saw the news about the hotel chain, I was elbow deep in a box of my grandpa's old things, trying to decide what to keep and what to throw away. My phone buzzed on the table, and I glanced at it without much interest. Then I saw the headline, Local Enamel RK Chenguang Hotel Chain, acquired by mystery buyer in deal valued at over 9 figures. 9 figures. My brain short-circuited for a second. I dropped the chipped enamel mug I'd been holding, and it clattered against the floor, spinning in a lazy circle. The mug had been Grandpa's favorite, the one he always drank his bitter black tea from, the one with a little crack in the rim that he'd never let me throw away. I picked it up, my hands shaking, and reread the headline 3 times. Chenguang Hotel. I knew that name. Everyone in my family knew that name, but nobody had ever read enough to remember it properly. When Grandpa was still alive, he used to pull out this old, worn-out photo album after dinner. He'd put on his reading glasses, the ones with the scratch lenses that he refused to replace, and he'd flip to the first page. There was a picture of a small, gray building, 2 stories high, with a hand-painted sign that said Chenguang in faded red letters. This was the first one, little knight, he'd say, using his old nickname for me. I built it myself, brick by brick, back in the 80s. Later on it grew. Became a real hotel. He'd trace his finger along the edge of the photograph, his voice softening. It wasn't much to look at, but it was mine. Nobody else ever listened. My father would scroll through his phone half nodding. My mother would be too busy checking her mahjong group messages. My cousins and older siblings would roll their eyes and make excuses to leave the room. Grandpa's stories were too slow for them, too old-fashioned. The hotel was just some rundown motel in the south of the city that had probably been torn down years ago anyway. Nobody asked questions. Nobody read except me that I was the one who stayed. I was the one who sat beside his hospital bed in those final months, watching him grow thinner and frilier, watching his hands tremble as he tried to hold that same photo album. He couldn't speak much at the end, just squeezed my fingers and smiled. There's nothing they're worth fighting over, he'd whispered once, his voice like rustling leaves. But there's something they're worth keeping. I didn't understand what he meant then. I thought he was talking about memories. I thought he was just an old man trying to hold on to a past that didn't matter anymore. Now I realized he had been talking about something else entirely. I scrolled down the news article, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The article mentioned that the hotel chain had expanded to 12 locations across the province, that it had been quietly profitable for years, that the original Chenguang Inn, the very first building, had been preserved as a small heritage exhibit. The mystery buyer was a young investor named Shen Yan, a Chinese-American entrepreneur who had recently returned to the country. There was a photo of him standing in front of the hotel's main entrance, wearing a tailored gray suit, his expression calm and unreadable. He looked familiar somehow, but I couldn't place it. I didn't have time to think about that before my phone root exploding. The family group chat, which had been dead silent for 6 months, suddenly came alive like a hornet's nest. My father was the first to type. Wait, wasn't that the little motel Dad used to run that's worth that much? My mother followed up with 5 exclamation points. Are you kidding me? If I'd known, I wouldn't have let him keep that stupid property all those years. My eldest cousin, Lin Chi, sent a voice message that I was too afraid to play. I could see the transcript preview. Grandpa was so unfair. He never told any of us anything. Where's the money now? Who got it? Then my older brother, Lin Kai, typed out a message that made my stomach churn. Lin Wan, you were the one always hanging around him. Did you convince him to leave everything to you? I read at the screen, my fingers frozen over the keyboard I wrote. They hadn't visited Grandpa for years. They hadn't called on his birthday. They had missed his funeral because they were too busy with work. And now they were here, circling like vultures, wondering how much of the CR cast they could tear off for themselves. I closed the group chat without responding. There was nothing I could say that would make them understand. They had seen Grandpa as a burden, a dusty old man with dusty old stories. They had no idea that those stories had been worth more than every single one of their designer handbags and luxuries CRS combined. I opened my browser and typed Shenyang into the CRCHBAR. The results flooded in. Ivy League graduate. $1 billion our family portfolio focused on hospitality and real estate. He had spent the last decade expanding his family's business across North America and had only recently shifted his focus back to China. The official reason for the acquisition, according to the press release, was strong confidence in the growth potential of the mid-tier hotel market. But something didn't sit right with me. There was a picture of Shen Yan from his college days. He was standing in front of what looked like a very old-fashioned hotel front desk. Behind him, BA Rely visible, was a wooden plaque with a single character on it. Morning. Chenguang. The same character from Grandpa's hotel sign. My throat tightened. This wasn't just a business transaction. This was personal. I just didn't know how yet. The next morning, I took a bus to the south side of the city, the old district where Grandpa's first inn had been located. I hadn't been there in years. The neighborhood had changed a lot. The narrow streets were lined with new apartment buildings and trendy cafes. But tucked in between two high-rises was a tiny two-story building with a faded red facade. It looked almost out of place, a relic from another era stubbornly refusing to disappear. A small sign above the door read, Chenguang Heritage Exhibition. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The space was small but serifully arranged. Photographs covered the walls, documenting the hotel's evolution from a single room into the sprawling chain it had eventually become. Display cases held old-fashioned room keys, a hand-painted room registry, and a yellowed receipt book with Grandpa's handwriting in the margins. In the center of the room, sitting on a wooden pedestal, was the old abacus he had used for decades, its beads worn smooth from his fingers. I was staring at the abacus when a voice came from behind me. You're one of the Lin grandchildren, aren't you? I spun around. Standing in the doorway was the man from the news article, Shen Yan. He was taller than he looked in the photographs, and thinner too, with sharp cheekbones and arch eyes that seemed to see right through you. He was holding a thick folder of documents in one hand, and he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not curiosity exactly. More like recognition. I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. Yes, I'm Lin Wan. This hotel, it belonged to my grandfather. I know, he said, his voice calm and even. He stepped further into the room, setting the folder down on the glass display case. Your grandfather, Lin Lao Xianshang, was an old friend of my father's. My father owed him a great deal. When my father was young and struggling, your grandfather sold a small storage room adjacent to this property and gave him the money to go abroad and study. It changed everything for my family. I blinked. Grandpa had never told me any of this. Whenever he talked about the old days, he only mentioned the travelers who had passed through, the tired salesmen, the young lovers, the families on vacation. He'd laugh and say, everyone has a story, little knight. And the walls here have he RD them all. He never mentioned that he'd helped anyone go to college. He never mentioned that he'd changed someone's life. Shen Yan pulled a document out of the folder and handed it to me. This is a Supplement A re-agreement to the acquisition contract. It's been sitting in our files for a while. My father always said that if anything ever happened to Chenguang, this had to be honored. I took the paper from him with trembling hands. It was written in formal legal language, but the gist was clear enough. A small memorial room and an adjacent undeveloped plot of land adjacent to the original property had been separately deeded to Lin Wan, in accordance with a private document my grandfather had signed years ago, long before his health started declining. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Grandpa had done this. He had planned for this. He had cut through the noise and made sure that something real and tangible, went to me. The granddaughter who stayed. The granddaughter who listened to his stories when no one else would. Eyes pricked at the corners of my eyes. I didn't know. He never told me. Shen Yan's expression softened, just slightly. He was a quiet man, from what my father says. A man who believed in doing good without expecting anything in return. My father tried for years to repay him, but your grandfather always refused. He said that helping someone was its own road. He paused, his voice dropping lower. This acquisition, it was my father's wish. He wanted to make sure that Chenguang's legacy was protected, no matter what. I clutched the paper to my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs. My relatives had descended on me like hawks, ready to tear me apart for money that wasn't even theirs. And here was a stranger whose family my grandfather had helped decades ago, handing me something that was mine. No questions asked. Just then, the door to the exhibition room slammed open. My cousin Lin Chi stormed in, her heels clicking angrily against the tile floor. Behind her came my father, my mother, my brother Lin Kai, and at least 5 other relatives I hadn't seen since the funeral. They had found me. They must have seen my bus ticket or followed my location or just guessed. I had never been good at hiding. There she is, Lin Chi shouted, pointing a manicured finger at me. Lin Wan, you think you can just sneak around and take everything for yourself? Grandpa's things belong to all of us. My father stepped forward, his face grim. Wan, we need to talk about this. You're young. You don't understand how these things work. We'll handle everything as a family like we always do. Like you always do, the words came out before I could stop them. You didn't visit him for 3 years. You didn't even answer the phone when I called to tell you he was sick. What exactly do you think you have a claim to? Lin Kai scoffed. Don't get dramatic. We were busy. And anyway, you were always his favorite. That doesn't mean he would have given you everything. He wasn't stupid. Shen Yan stepped forward, positioning himself between me and the crowd. He didn't raise his voice, but when he spoke, every word landed like a stone. The Supplement A re-agreement was notarized and legally filed more than 5 years ago. It has nothing to do with the current acquisition, and it is not subject to family disputes. If anyone has questions about the legal validity of these documents, I can have my lawyers draw up a formal explanation. My mother tried to push past him to grab my ARM, but Shen Yan didn't budge. He looked at her with civil, polite distance, the kind of look that made it very clear he was not going to be intimidated. Lin Chi's face turned red. And who are you anyway? You're some outsider coming in here, trying to steal what's ours. I'm the person who just bought your grandfather's hotel chain for 9 figures, Shen Yan said flatly. And I'm also the person who made sure that your grandfather's final wishes were respected. If you'd like to dispute that in court, you're welcome to try. The room went silent. Even my dad, who always had something to say, clamped his mouth shut. 9 figures. The reminder of the money was enough to make them back off. For now, Shen Yan turned to me, his voice dropping to a level only I could hear. Let's get out of here. I'll drive you somewhere quiet. We can talk about the land whenever you're ready. I nodded, unable to speak. He led me toward the back exit, through a narrow hallway and out into the alley behind the building. The sunlight hit my face, warm and blinding, and for a moment I just stood there, breathing in the smell of old brick and Seoul King oil from the nearby street stalls. My phone buzzed again. I looked down and saw a message from my fiancé, Chen Yu. Hey babe, I'll be late tonight. Important client meeting. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you. I read at the screen. Chen Yu and I had been together for 2.5 years. Our wedding was supposed to be next month. I'd spent the last 6 months picking out venues, trying on dresses, arguing with my mother about the guest list. He had been supportive, I thought. He had been present. But now, reading that message, all I felt was a cold, hollow emptiness. Shen Yan glanced at my phone, then at my face. He didn't ask any questions. He just opened the passenger door of his black sedan and said, You don't have to go anywhere you don't want to. We can get some food first. There's a wonton place around the corner that's been open for 30 years. My father used to go there with your grandfather. I got into the car without saying a word. My hands were still shaking, but something about his quiet, steady presence made it easier to breathe. As we pulled away from the curb, I saw my family spilling out of the exhibition exit, shouting and pointing. I turned my head and watched them grow smaller in the side mirror until they dissipated around a corner. I was leaving something behind back there, something heavy and ugly that had been weighing me down for years. But I was also carrying something 4-way road. A piece of paper with my grandfather's signature on it. A promise that had been made to a girl who had never expected anything in return, and maybe, just maybe, a future I hadn't dared to imagine. Shen Yan drove in silence for a few minutes before he spoke again, his voice gentle. The wonton place. It's not fancy. But the owner still uses the same recipe from when your grandpa used to come in. The shrimp wontons are the best in the city. I turned to look at him. In profile, with the afternoon light streaming through the windshield, he looked less like a ruthless businessman and more like someone who had been entrusted with a secret he was only now ready to share. "I'd like that," I said softly. "I'd like that a lot." We pulled up to a small storefront with a faded red awning and steaming pots visible through the window. The smell of broth and green onions drifted out, warm and comforting. I realized with a start that I hadn't eaten anything since breakfast. My stomach growled, loud enough for Shen Yan to hear. He smiled, just the tiniest curve of his lips, and pushed open the door for me. "After you, Lin Wan." I stepped inside, and for the first time in 24 hours, I felt like I could breathe again. Want to know what happens next? Drop a comment and let me know if you want Lin Wan to confront Chen Yu, or if she should focus on rebuilding her grandfather's legacy first. This is just the beginning, and trust me, the drama is only heating up. Subscribe to my page so you don't miss the next chapter. Your girl is about to get her life together, and I promise it's going to be a wild ride. Dumpling Flex biceps sparkles. The wonton place was exactly as Shen Yan had described it. Small, cluttered, with mismatched plastic chairs and a handwritten menu taped to the wall above the counter. The owner was a round-faced woman in her 60s who greeted Shen Yan like a long-lost nephew and gave me a long, knowing look before disappearing into the steamy kitchen. When the bowls arrived, they were filled with plump shrimp wontons swimming in a clear, fragrant broth, topped with chopped green onions and a drizzle of chili oil. I took one bite and felt something loosen in my chest. It tasted like comfort. It tasted like home. Shen Yan ate quietly, not pushing me to talk. We sat at a tiny table by the window, watching the afternoon sun filter through the dusty glass. The street outside was busy with old men playing chess on the sidewalk and aunties bargaining over vegetables at a makeshift stall. It was so ordinary, so unremarkable, that it almost made me forget the chaos I'd left behind. But I couldn't forget for long. My phone kept buzzing in my pocket. Chen Yu had sent 3 more messages, each one more urgent than the last. "Where are you? Are you okay? Call me back." The last one said, "I'm coming over to your place tonight. We need to talk." I pushed my phone away, the wontons suddenly tasteless in my mouth. Shen Yan noticed. He didn't say anything, just refilled my tea from the ceramic pot on the table and slid it toward me with a quiet nod. "I don't know what to do about him," I heard myself say. My voice came out small and tired. "About Chen Yu. He's my fiancé. We're supposed to get married next month. And I just found him at a cafe with another woman yesterday. Right before I saw you." Shen Yan set down his chopsticks. "Did he explain it?" "He said he'd explain. He's been calling me all day." I pressed my palms against my eyes. "But I don't even want to hear it. I don't know how I'm supposed to look at him after that. After everything that happened yesterday, it all just feels so small. The hotel. The land. Grandpa. And then there he is, holding hands with someone else, and he doesn't even have the decency to tell me the truth." Shen Yan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured, careful. "My father always said that people reveal who they really are in moments when they think no one is watching. Your fiancé thought you weren't watching. He showed you exactly what he values. The question is, what are you going to do with that information?" I looked at him. The afternoon light caught the edges of his face, softening his sharp features. He wasn't telling me what to do. He was just asking me to think. "I don't know," I admitted. "I feel like I should be furious. And I am a little. But mostly I just feel tired. Like I've been carrying something heavy for years, and I only just realized I don't have to hold it anymore." Shen Yan nodded slowly. "That tiredness is telling you something. Listen to it." We finished our wontons in comfortable silence. He paid the bill. I tried to argue, but he just shook his head and said, "Next time you can treat me." It was such a simple, offhand thing to say, but it made my heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with Chen Yu. Next time. He was already assuming there would be a next time. He drove me back to my apartment. It was a small one-bedroom on the 4th floor of a walk-up building, cluttered with wedding planning binders and half-unpacked boxes from the move we'd been planning together. I hadn't been back since yesterday. The sight of it made me feel claustrophobic. I was about to say goodbye to Shen Yan when I saw a familiar silver car parked outside the building. Chen Yu's car. He was leaning against the hood, arms crossed, phone in hand. The moment he spotted me getting out of Shen Yan's sedan, his expression shifted from relief to something darker. Lin Wan, he called out, pushing off the car and walking toward RDS. His steps were hurried, almost aggressive. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you all day. You haven't answered any of my calls. I stood my ground, refusing to let my voice waver. I was busy. Busy with him. Chen Yu's eyes flicked over to Shen Yan, sizing him up. He was shorter than Shen Yan, broader in the shoulders, with a sugary jaw and a smile that had always made me feel safe until yesterday. Now that smile looked like a mask that was rooting to crack. Who is this? My grandfather's hotel got sold yesterday, I said, keeping my voice steady. The man who bought it was kind enough to show me around the heritage exhibit and buy me lunch. That's all. A lunch, Chen Yu repeated, his tone dripping with disbelief. You disappeared for a whole day and didn't think to tell me you were having lunch with some rich stranger. I felt my temper elevate. You were at a cafe with a woman who wasn't me. You were holding her hand and wiping coffee off her face. So don't you talk to me about disappearing. Chen Yu's face went pale. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. That was a client. A business meeting. You're reading too much into it. Was the client wearing your favorite cologne? I shot back. Was she leaning close enough to leave lipstick on your collar? Because I saw it, Chen Yu. I saw everything. He had the decency to look ashamed for a second. Then he rallied, stepping closer and lowering his voice. We're about to get married. We have a venue booked, a deposit paid, a guest list finalized. You can't just throw all of that away because you saw something that you misinterpreted. Misinterpreted? A bitter laugh escaped me. I know what I saw. And right now, I don't want to hear your excuses. I need time to think. Shen Yan, who had been standing quietly beside his car, finally spoke up. She said she needs time. That means you should go. Chen Yu swung toward him, his jaw tight. Stay out of this. This is between me and my fiancé. Shen Yan didn't flinch. I'm not getting involved in your relationship. I'm just pointing out that she's clearly upset, and you're not helping by standing here and arguing with her on the street. Chen Yu's hands balled into fists. For a terrifying moment, I thought he was going to swing. But then he looked at me, really looked, and something in his expression shifted. It wasn't remorse. It was calculation. He was figuring out how to win this argument, how to twist things back in his favor. Fine, he said, stepping back. Take your time. But we need to talk about the wedding. And about your family. I've been getting calls from your cousins all morning. They said something about a hotel and a piece of land. They said you were trying to cut them out. I felt my heart sink. Of course they'd already gotten to him. My family had always been good at that, playing the victim, rallying support, making me look like the greedy one. The land belongs to me, I said, each word real and deliberate. My grandfather deeded it to me personally. There's documentation. It's not up for debate. Chen Yu shook his head slowly, as if I'd disappointed him. You're being stubborn, Wan. Your family just wants their fair share. And so do I, honestly. We're supposed to be building a life together. How's that supposed to happen if you're keeping assets secret from me? I stared at him, my chest tightening. He hadn't even asked about the hotel. He hadn't asked about the heritage exhibit, or what it meant to me, or how I was feeling about my grandfather's legacy. He'd gone straight to the money. The land. What he could get out of it. Get out of here, Chen Yu, I said, my voice low. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk. But right now, I can't look at you. He tried one more time, reaching out to touch my arm. I pulled away. His hand hung in the air for a moment, then dropped. He got back in his car and drove off without another word. I stood there in the empty parking lot, my legs trembling beneath me. Shen Yan didn't say anything. He just walked up beside me and stood there, solid and silent, waiting for me to find my footing. He doesn't get it, I finally said, my voice cracking. He doesn't get any of it. Shen Yan tilted his head. He gets enough to know the land has value. That's all that matters to him. I thought I was going to marry him, I confessed, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I thought we were going to build a life together. But I'm just realizing that he's been building his own life, and I was just part of the scaffolding. Something to hold him up until he was ready to stand on his own. Shen Yan was quiet for a beat. Then he said, very gently, scaffolding can be taken down. You get to decide what you want to build next. Something about his words hit me right in the chest. I looked up at him, and for the first time all day, I felt like I could take a full breath. Thank you, I said, for everything. The wontons, the ride home, standing there when I needed someone to stand there. I don't know how to repay you. He smiled, that small, rueful smile I was rooting to recognize. You don't have to repay me. Just promise me one thing. What? Promise you'll think ruefully before you let anyone convince you that what's yours isn't yours. He held my gaze steady and sure. Your grandfather left that land to you for a reason. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for honoring his wish. I nodded, blinking back the TRS that had a route to form again. I promise. He drove away after that, leaving me alone in the fading daylight. I climbed the stairs to my apartment and unlocked the door. The wedding binders were still scattered across the dining table. I walked over to them, picked up the top one, and threw it into the trash can. It felt good. It felt like the first step toward something new. My phone buzzed one last time. It wasn't Chen Yu. It was a text from an unknown number. The message read, "This is Shen Yan. I just wanted to say, your grandfather would be proud of you. Good night, Lin Wan." I saved his number, and for the first time in months, I fell asleep without any regrets. But I knew this wasn't over. My family wasn't going to give up. Chen Yu wasn't going to give up. And deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted them to. Because if they kept pushing, I would finally have the courage to push back. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I wasn't going to run away from any of it. I was going to the law firm my grandfather had used for his estate matters. I was going to find out exactly what was mine and what I could do with it. And I was going to do it alone, without Chen Yu, without my family, without anyone telling me what I should or shouldn't do. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew I wasn't completely alone. I had the memory of my grandfather's stories. I had a photo album full of old photographs. And I had the number of a man who had shown me more kindness in 2 days than my fiancé had shown me in 2 years. That had to count for something. Want to see Lin Wan take control of her life and shut down her family for good? Subscribe now and don't miss the next chapter. Trust me, things are about to get messy, and I mean that in the best way possible. 2 hard sunset sparkles. I was sitting in the conference room of the law firm before 9 the next morning. The receptionist had looked at me with mild surprise when I walked in. Most people didn't schedule appointments at the crack of dawn, but she'd ushered me in anyway. The lawyer who met me was a middle-aged woman named Attorney Zhao. Her office was cluttered with folders, her glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She had the efficient, no-nonsense air of someone who had dealt with complicated estates her entire career. "Miss Lin," she said, spreading a thick file across the table between us. "I have the complete documentation regarding your grandfather's property. The land you're referring to is Parcel 12A in the Southern District. It's approximately 300 square meters, zoned for commercial use, with no outstanding liens or encumbrances. Your grandfather placed it in a trust with your name as the sole beneficiary 6 years ago. The trust is irrevocable and has already been executed." I blinked. Irrevocable, so no one else can claim it. Attorney Zhao smiled grimly. "Not unless they can prove fraud, undue influence, or some other form of legal misconduct. And from what I can see in this file, your grandfather was of sound mind and fully consulted with a third-party legal advisor before signing. It's about as airtight as these things get." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My family has been calling me nonstop. They're saying I cheated them out of their inheritance. People will say a lot of things when they think they're owed something that doesn't belong to them, Attorney Zhao said, her eyes glinting. "But let me give you some advice. Send them to me. All of them. I'll happily explain the terms of the trust in language they can't argue with. After that, if they want to dispute it in court, they're welcome to try, but they won't win." I felt a surge of gratitude so strong it almost made me dizzy. "Thank you. I didn't know where else to turn. You turned to the right place. She slid a business card across the table. Keep this. Call me if anyone tries anything. I'll handle it. I left the law firm feeling lighter than I had in months. The morning sun was bright and clear, the streets already bustling with traffic and pedestrians. I bought a cup of coffee from a street vendor and stood on the sidewalk, letting the warmth of it seep into my hands. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. I answered against my better judgment, bracing myself. Lin Wan, she said, her voice tight and strained. We need to talk. All of us. The whole family. Your father's arranged a meeting at his office tonight. You need to be there. A meeting about what? About the land. About the hotel. About everything your grandfather left behind that you've been keeping from us. Her tone sharpened. Don't play dumb with me. I know you went to see a lawyer this morning. One of your cousins works in that building. They saw you. Of course. Of course they were watching me. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. Mom, I'm not keeping anything from anyone. Grandpa left me the land. It was his choice. There's nothing to discuss. Your grandfather was old and confused at the end, she said, her voice dropping into something that sounded almost like pity. You were the one taking care of him. You had access. People can be influenced, Lin Wan. People can be pressured. I'm not accusing you of anything, but we have to be fair. We have to give everyone a chance to speak their piece. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that Grandpa had been sharper than anyone in that family combined right up until his last breath. That he'd seen through their fake concern and their empty promises. That he'd planned everything with precision and love. But I knew it wouldn't matter. They had already convinced themselves of their version of the truth. What time I heard myself say? 7 o'clock. At your father's shop. Don't be late. She hung up before I could respond. I spent the rest of the day in a fog. I went home, organized my grandfather's photo album, and tried to draft a plan for the land. Maybe a community, reread. Maybe a small bookstore. Maybe a studio where I could actually use the design degree I'd spent years learning but never fully pursued. The possibilities felt endless, but they were hard to focus on with the meeting looming in the back of my mind. By 6:30, I was standing outside my father's watch repair shop. It was a tiny storefront wedged between a bakery and a hardware store, crammed with clocks and spa artists and the faint smell of oil. My father had been a watchmaker his whole life, a quiet man who loved small mechanisms and precision work. I'd always respected him for that, but I'd never quite forgiven him for the way he'd distanced himself from his own father. I pushed open the door. The bell above it jingled. Inside, the family was already assembled. My mother sat on a stool near the counter, arms crossed. My brother Lin Kai leaned against the wall, scrolling through his phone with studied disinterest. My cousin Lin Chi was perched on a display case, her sharp eyes fixed on me the moment I walked in. 5 other aunts and uncles filled the cramped space, their faces a mix of hostility and anticipation. My father was behind the counter, polishing a pocket watch with a soft cloth. He didn't look up when I entered. Close the door, he said quietly, that I obeyed. The bell jingled again, and then there was silence. Lin Wan, he began, still not meeting my eyes. We've been talking about this situation. The land, the hotel, all of it. And we've come to a conclusion. Before you say anything, I interjected, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Let me tell you what I know. I met with a lawyer this morning. The land is legally mine. It was placed in an irrevocable trust 6 years ago. There's nothing anyone can do to change that. Lin Chi snorted. A trust she was probably orchestrating behind Grandpa's back. Do you have any idea how that looks? I have no idea how anything looks to people who didn't visit him for 3 years, I shot back, my voice rising. I have no idea how anything looks to people who missed his funeral because it was inconvenient. I was there. I was there when he was scared. I was there when he was in pain. I held his hand while he passed. And not a single one of you, not a single one, lifted a finger to help. The room went deathly quiet. Even Lin Kai looked up from his phone. My father stopped polishing the watch. He set down the cloth and finally looked at me. His eyes were tired, his face lined with years of small disappointments. We're not here to argue about who visited more, he said slowly. We're here to figure out how to divide this fairly. Grandpa had a responsibility to his family, and he failed that responsibility by leaving everything to one person. He left me one piece of land, I said, my hands shaking. One. Everything else, the hotel, the chain, the money, was sold to someone outside the family. There's no inheritance, Dad. There's just a plot of land that Grandpa wanted me to have because I was the only one who asked him about his life. Then why didn't you tell us about the trust? Lin Chi demanded. Why did you keep it a secret? Because I didn't know about it until 2 days ago. I shouted. I found out the same way you did, through a lawyer and a Supplement A re-agreement. I had no idea Grandpa had done any of this. But now that I know, I'm going to honor his wish. And nothing any of you say is going to change that. My mother stood up abruptly. You're being selfish, Lin Wan. Selfish and stubborn. That land could be sold. Divided. We could all benefit from it. Instead, you want to keep it for yourself because you think you're special. Because Grandpa thought I was special, I corrected her. And I'm done apologizing for that. The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Accusations, threats, guilt trips. Someone said I was ruining the family. Someone said I'd always been like this, always been Grandpa's favorite, always been a little too proud. My brother asked why I'd gotten a design degree if I wasn't even using it. My cousin suggested I'd been manipulating Grandpa for years. I stood in the middle of it all, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. But I didn't cry. I didn't back down. I just waited until the noise died down and then I said, very clear, I'm not selling the land. I'm not sharing it. And I'm not discussing this again. I turned and walked out of the shop, the bell jingling one final time behind me. The street outside was dark now, the evening air well against my face. I walked for a long time without knowing where I was going, my footsteps echoing against the pavement. Eventually I found myself in front of the Wonton place. The lights were still on, and through the window I could see the owner wiping down tables. She spotted me and waved. I hesitated, then pushed open the door. Late night, she said, gesturing to a seat. You look like you need some soup. Sit. I sat. She brought me a bowl of wontons without waiting for me to order, and the warmth of it spread through me like a small miracle. I was halfway through the bowl when the door opened again. I looked up, and there was Shen Yan. He was wearing the same kind of understated clothes as before, a dark jacket and worn-in jeans, but his expression was sharper tonight, more alert. Evening, he said, sitting down across from me without asking. I was in the neighborhood. Saw the light on. I tried to smile, but it came out crooked. I just had a meeting with my family. I figured. He didn't press for details. Instead, he flagged down the owner and ordered a bowl for himself. So, what's your next move? I looked at him across the table. The steam from the wonton broth rose between us, softening the edges of his face. He was a stranger, technically. We'd only known each other for 2 days. And yet he felt more reliable than anyone I'd known for years. I'm going to build something, I said. On that land. Something that would make my grandpa proud. What kind of something? I thought about it. The design degree I'd never fully used. The sketches I used to draw as a teenager. Buildings that existed only in my imagination. The way Grandpa had once told me that a good building was like a good story. It had a beginning, a middle, and an ending that made you want to stay. A community space, I said slowly. A library with a small cafe. Maybe a few rooms for artists and writers to work. Something that brings people together the way Grandpa's hotel used to. Not for profit. For connection. Shen Yan's eyes lit up. Just a flicker, but I caught it. That's a good idea. A really good idea. You think so? I know so. He leaned four-way RD, his elbows on the table. And I might know someone who can help. My father has been looking for projects to support in this city. He'd probably jump at the chance to fund something connected to your grandfather's legacy. I read at him. You'd do that, you'd help me. I'd do more than help. His voice was low, serious. I'd partner with you. If you want. I've been looking for a reason to stay in this city. This feels like the right one. I didn't know what to say. My heart was racing again, but for a different reason now. This wasn't panic. This was possibility. I'm not sure I know how to do this, I admitted. I'm not a businesswoman. I'm just someone who likes to draw buildings and read old books. Shen Yan smiled. Good. Because I don't need a businesswoman. I need someone with vision. Someone who's CA residential about the story behind the building, not just the numbers. That's you, Lin Wan. That's always been you. The owner came over and set down his bowl of wontons. He picked up his chopsticks, and I picked up mine, and we ate together in comfortable silence. Somewhere in the background, a radio was playing an old folk song. The other diners were laughing and talking, living their ordinary lives. And I sat there in the middle of it all, feeling like I was finally where I was supposed to be. That night when I got home, I pulled out the photo album and opened it to the first page. The gray building STA read back at me. I ran my finger along its faded edges and whispered into the quiet room, I'll make it beautiful, Grandpa. I promise. Then I turned to my laptop and STA route designing. If you want to see Lin Wan bring her vision to life and watch her family's heads explode when they find out what she's building, make sure to subscribe. The next chapter is going to be full of surprises and maybe a little romance. Winking face sparkles building construction. The next few weeks were a blur of blueprints and phone calls and late-night meetings at the wonton place. I threw myself into the design like someone drowning in air, gasping for every breath, desperate to prove to myself that I could actually do this. I'd spent years working at a mediocre architecture firm, drawing up plans for office buildings and shopping malls that I didn't see a re about. This was different. This was personal. Every line I sketched, every window I placed, every corner I rounded felt like a conversation with my grandfather. I could almost hear him nodding in approval. Shen Yan's father, old Mr. Shen, turned out to be exactly as generous as his son had promised. He called me from his home in Vancouver, and we talked for an hour about Grandpa and the old days. His voice crackled with warmth over the phone. Lin Lao Xian Sheng was the best man I ever met, he said. He gave me a chance when no one else would. Whatever you need for this project, money, connections, advice, you have it. Consider it my debt finally paid. It wasn't a debt, I wanted to tell him. Grandpa had never seen it that way, but I understood what he meant. Some kindnesses were too big to be forgotten. Shen Yan and I met almost every day to work on the plans. He brought CLA righty to my chaos, helping me navigate building permits and zoning regulations while I focused on the creative side. He never once tried to take over or impose his own vision. He just listened, asked good questions, and pushed me to think bigger than I'd ever read. The library section should have skylights, I said one evening, spreading my sketches across the table at the wonton place. Natural light is better for reading. And the cafe should face the street, so people walking by can see what's happening inside. He studied the drawings, his brow furrowed. What about the Jardin ID? Added a small courtyard in the back, ringed with flower beds and a few wooden benches. That's for events. Poetry readings, book clubs, maybe even some outdoor movie screenings in the summer. I want this place to be alive. Not just a building, but a gathering spot. He looked up at me, something unreadable in his eyes. You've thought about this a lot. Since I was a kid, I admitted. I used to sketch buildings in the margins of my homework. Grandpa saw some of them once. He told me to never stop drawing. He said the world needed more places that made people want to stay. Shen Yan smiled at that. He was right. Things were going well. Almost too well. And that's when my family decided to show up again. I was at the construction site overseeing the initial clearing of the land when I saw my brother's car pull up. Lin Kai got out, followed by my father. They walked toward me with the kind of grim determination that made my stomach clench. Behind them, I spotted another car, a silver sedan I recognized all too well. Chen Yu. Of course. Of course he was with them now. I set down my clipboard and waited. The workers around me paused, sensing the tension in the air. Lin Wan, my father began, his voice carrying that same tired, disappointed tone from the meeting at his shop. We need to talk. We've done enough talking, I said, keeping my voice level. I told you I'm not changing my mind. Chen Yu stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Hey, just hear us out, okay? Your dad came to me. He's worried about you. We're all worried about you. Worried about me or worried about the land? I asked. Chenyu winced. Can't it be both? Look, I know we've had our issues. I know I messed up, but I'm still your fiancé. I still see a re about you. And I don't think you're thinking straight right now. This project is huge. It's going to cost more money than you have. You're going to get in over your head. I have investors, I said. Good ones. I'm not taking out loans. I'm not going into debt. This is being done right. My brother scoffed. Investors, you mean that Shin guy, the one who's been following you around like a lost puppy? You think he's helping you out of the goodness of his heart? Wake up, Lin Wan. He's using you. He wants the land for himself. That's the only reason anyone would see a re about a patch of dirt in this dead neighborhood. He's not using me, I said, but even as I said it, a tiny sliver of doubt wormed its way into my chest. It was small and irrational, but it was there. Then what does he want? Chenyu pressed. Why is he so invested in you and your grandfather's land? What's in it for him? I didn't have an answer to that. And my hesitation must have shown on my face, because Chenyu seized on it immediately. See, you don't even know. That's how it works with people like him. They swoop in, they play the hero, and then they take everything. I've seen it happen before. I don't want that to be you. My father stepped closer, his voice softening into something that sounded almost like genuine concern. Wan, we're not trying to take anything away from you. We just want to make sure you're protected. Your grandfather's land is worth a lot. If you get caught up in something you don't fully understand, you could lose everything. I'm not going to lose anything, I said firmly. And I'm not going to let you talk me out of this. This is my project. My land. My decision. Chenyu shook his head. You're being stubborn. You've always been stubborn. But being stubborn isn't the same as being right. Is that what you told yourself when you went to that cafe with your client? I shot back. Did you convince yourself that you were doing the right thing by lying to me? His face reddened. That's different. That was a mistake. A small one. You're making a huge mistake that could ruin your entire future. My future doesn't involve you, I said, my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands. Not anymore. I'm calling off the wedding. I should have done it the moment I saw you with her. I was just too red to admit that I'd been wrong about you. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. Chenyu read at me, his mouth opening and closing. My father looked at the ground. Lin Kai's phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the dusty ground. You can't be serious, Chenyu finally managed. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. I looked at him and I felt something release inside me, a knot I'd been sighing for so long I'd forgotten it was there. I don't love you. Not the way I thought I did. And I don't think you love me either. Not the way someone should before they get married. So let's just end this. Cleanly. Without dragging it out. Chenyu's expression shifted from shock to anger to something that looked almost like hurt. You'll regret this, he said. You're throwing everything away. No, I'm finally choosing something for myself. He turned around without another word and walked back to his car. His tires squealed as he sped away, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. My father and Lin Kai stood there, looking at me like I was a stranger they'd never met before. You just broke off your engagement, my father said slowly. In front of everyone. On your construction site. I did, I agreed. And I'm not going to apologize for it. I've spent my whole life trying to please everyone. Trying to keep the peace. Trying to make things work even when they were clear or a why broken. I'm done. I'm building something new, and if you don't want to be party of it, that's fine. But you're not going to stop me. My father was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded, almost imperceptibly. You got your mother's stubbornness, he said. And your grandfather's heart. I don't know if that's a good combination or a dangerous one. But I'm Estia, rooting to think it's not up to me to decide. He turned and walked back to his car, my brother trailing behind him. Lin Kai paused at the door and looked back at me. You're crazy, you know that. Maybe, I said. But at least I'm not miserable. He shook his head, but there was something almost like respect in his expression. Then he got in the car and drove away. I stood alone in the middle of the construction site, the late afternoon sun warming my shoulders. The workers had gone back to their tasks, pretending they hadn't heard anything. I bent down, picked up a handful of the dry, dusty soil, and let it run through my fingers. This was my land. My dirt. My future. I heard footsteps behind me and turned around. Shen Yan was walking toward me, stirring 2 paper cups of coffee. He stopped a few feet away and held one out to me. I saw the whole thing from the road, he said. That took courage. I took the coffee, our fingers brushing for just a moment. It took being tired of being reread, I said. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. What was that thing your brother said about me using you? My stomach dropped. You heard that. The windows were open. And I've got good EARS. He smiled, but his eyes were serious. You should know why I'm really here. Why I'm helping with all of this. My artist root pounding again. You don't have to explain anything. Yes, I do. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. I'm here because your grandfather changed my father's life. And because, when I was a kid, my father told me stories about this man who gave him a chance when no one else would. I grew up thinking that's the kind of person I wanted to be. Someone who helps people without expecting anything back. He paused, his gaze dropping to the coffee cup in his hands. But I also stayed because of you. Because I met someone who's residential about the same things I read about. Someone who fights for what she believes in. Someone who makes me want to keep coming back to this city. I felt the air leave my lungs. Shen Yan, I'm not saying this because I want something from you, he said quickly. I'm saying it because I think you deserve to know the truth. All of it. No games, no secrets. Just me, telling you that I've never met anyone quite like you. I didn't know what to say. My face was burning, my heart racing. I looked down at the coffee in my hands, then back up at his face. I don't know what to do with that information, I admitted. You don't have to do anything, he said. Just keep being yourself. Keep building your dream. And if I can help, I will. That's all I'm offering. No strings attached. I took a sip of my coffee to give myself a moment to process. It was perfect. Just the right amount of sugar and cream. He'd remembered how I liked it. Okay, I said finally. Okay, I can work with that. He smiled, that small, reeful smile I was getting used to, and gestured toward the plans I'd laid out on a y crate. Now, show me that garden again. I have some ideas about the lighting. We spent the next hour going over designs and laughing about the terrible layout of the old city library. When the sun finally set, casting long shadows across the construction site, he walked me to my car and opened the door for me. Same time tomorrow, he asked. Same time tomorrow, I agreed. I drove home that night with a smile I couldn't wipe off my face. My family had tried to tear me down. My ex-fiancé had tried to make me feel small. But I'd stood my ground, and I'd come out stronger on the other side. And somewhere along the way, I'd found a partner who actually believed in me. If you're rooting for Lin Wan and Shen Yan as much as I am, you won't want to miss what happens next. Subscribe now and join the journey, because this is where things really start to get good. 2 Hearts Herb Sparkles. 6 months later, I stood in the middle of the completed community space and felt like I was dreaming. The building had transformed from a patch of dusty, forgotten land into something that looked like it had been pulled straight from my sketchbooks. The main hall was open and airy, with the skylights I'd insisted on flooding the space with soft, golden light. Rows of wooden bookshelves lined the walls, filled with donations from local publishers and used bookstores that had heard about the project and wanted to contribute. The cafe was tucked into the corner, warm and inviting, with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu that listed the daily specials. Outside, the courtyard garden had bloomed into a riot of color, roses and hydrangeas and jasmine vines climbing the trellises I'd designed myself. It was everything I'd imagined and more, but the grand opening was scheduled for Saturday. I'd been running on coffee and adrenaline for weeks, making sure every detail was perfect. The staff had been hired and trained. The event schedule was finalized. The local newspaper had even done a small feature on the project, calling it a fresh start for the old neighborhood. But the thing that made my heart swell the most was the plaque by the entrance. It was small and simple, etched in brass, in memory of Lin Lao Xiansheng, who believed that every building should tell a story. This one tells his. Shan Yan had commissioned it without telling me. I'd walked in one morning and found it already installed, glinting in the morning light. I'd cried for a full 10 minutes while he stood beside me, handing me tissues and pretending not to notice my red-rimmed eyes. You didn't have to do that, I'd said, my voice thick. Yes, I did, he'd replied. Because his story deserves to be told. And because you deserve to see it every day. That was the thing about Shan Yan. He never did grand, sweeping gestures. He did quiet, thoughtful ones. He showed up early to help me move furniture. He brought me coffee without being asked. He listened to my endless rambling about color palettes and lighting fixtures and never once made me feel like I was being ridiculous. I'd fallen for him somewhere along the way. I didn't know exactly when. Maybe that first night at the wonton place, maybe the afternoon he showed up at the construction site with his coffee and his steady presence, maybe a dozen little moments in between. But I'd fallen hard, and I was pretty sure he felt the same way, that the Friday before the grand opening, I was at the building doing a final walkthrough when my phone buzzed. I expected it to be Shan Yan confirming our dinner plans, but instead I saw my mother's name on the screen. My stomach tightened. We hadn't spoken since the meeting at my father's shop. I'd had the occasional text from my cousin Lin Chi, mostly snide remarks about how my little hobby project was going to fail, but my parents had been conspicuously silent. I answered the call, bracing myself. Lin Wan, my mother said, and her voice sounded different. Softer. Tired. We heard about the opening. Your father and we'd like to come. I dropped my phone. You want to come? Your grandfather would have wanted us there, she said quietly. I know we've had our differences. I know we said things that were unkind. But we've been watching what you've been building. The newspaper article. The photos on social media. And we realized that you did something we never could. You honored him. You made something beautiful out of what he left behind. I didn't know what to say. My throat was tight with emotion. I'm not asking you to forgive us, she continued. I'm just asking if we can be there. Your father and I. Maybe your brother too. He's been talking about it more than he'd admit. I took a deep breath. Yes, I said. Yes, you can come. All of you. Thank you, Wan Wan. She paused. And I'm sorry. For everything. We should have been there for you. We should have been there for your grandfather. We were wrong. I didn't tell her it was okay, because it wasn't. Not completely. But I told her I appreciated the apology, and I meant it. It was a start. The grand opening day arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, a gentle breeze, the kind of golden autumn afternoon that felt like it had been designed for new beginnings. The courtyard was filled with chairs and a small stage for the opening speeches. The cafe was serving free coffee and pastries. Volunteers were handing out bookmarks and flyers. I was in the main hall, adjusting a display of local authors, when I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw Lin Chi approaching, her arms crossed over her chest. She looked different from the last time I'd seen her. Softer. The usual sharp edge in her eyes had dulled into something more uncertain. Hey, she said awkwardly. So, this is actually really nice. Thanks, I said, genuinely surprised. I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't, she admitted. But Mom and Dad made a big deal out of it. And I figured. She shrugged. I figured I should at least see what all the fuss was about. I gestured around the room. This is the fuss. She took a slow walk around the main hall, running her hand along the bookshelves, peering into the cafe, stepping out into the courtyard to see the garden. When she came back, her expression had shifted. Grandpa would have loved this, she said quietly. He would have sat in that corner over there with his tea and just watched people. He always liked watching people. My eyes stung. Yeah, he did. Lin Chi looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something like warmth in her face. I'm sorry, she said. For all the things I said. For the way we all treated you. We were jealous, I think. And we didn't know how to handle it. It's okay, I said. And this time, I almost meant it, she nodded, then cleared her throat. Anyway, I came to tell you something. Chen Yu is here. My heart dropped. What? He showed up about 10 minutes ago. He's standing outside by the main entrance. I think he wants to talk to you. I looked toward the door, a chill running down my spine. The last thing I needed on this day was a confrontation with my ex-fiancé. But I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. Thanks for telling me, I said. I'll handle it. I walked out of the main hall and found Chen Yu standing near the entrance, hands in his pockets, looking lost. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him. His face was paler, his eyes more hollow. He looked like someone who'd been carrying a heavy burden and wasn't sure how to put it down. Lin Wan, he said when he saw me. Congratulations. This place is incredible. Thank you, I said wearily. Why are you here, Chen Yu? He shuffled his feet. I wanted to apologize. For everything. The way I treated you. The way I lied to you. I was an idiot. I had something good and I threw it away because I was too selfish to see what I had. I agreed. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm just glad I moved on. He nodded slowly. I figured you would. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I know this is weird, but I wanted to give you this. Consider it a wedding gift. Even though we didn't get married. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter, my grandfather's handwriting. It was dated a few months before he died, Dr. Chen Yu. It read, if you're reading this, it means you're going to marry my granddaughter. I don't know what kind of man you are yet, but I hope you're the kind who will take care of her. She's the best thing our family ever produced. Don't let her down. And if you do, I hope she's strong enough to walk away. I looked up at Chen Yu, my eyes wide. How did you get this? Your grandfather gave it to me the last time I visited him, he said quietly. I know. I visited him. Once. I never told you because I didn't want to admit that I'd been hiding things from you even then. But he gave me that letter and told me to hold on to it until I knew what kind of man I wanted to be. And I realized I wasn't good enough. But you deserve to have it anyway. I clutched the letter to my chest. My grandfather had planned for everything. Even this. Even the possibility that the man I was going to marry might not be the right one. Thank you, I said, my voice being reliable above a whisper. Thank you for giving this to me. Chen Yu nodded. I'm going to go now. I just wanted to make sure you knew. Goodbye, Lin Wan. I hope you find what you're looking for. He walked away, and I watched him go. There was no anger left in me. Just a quiet sense of closure. I turned and walked back inside. The main hall was rooting to fill up. My parents were sitting in the front row of the courtyard chairs, my father holding my mother's hand. My brother was talking to one of the volunteers, actually smiling for once. Lin Chi was helping herself to a pastry. And at the back of the room, NEA the plaque dedicated to my grandfather, stood Xin Yan. He was wearing a dark blue suit that made his eyes look almost black, and he was watching me with an expression so soft and open that my heart skipped a beat. I walked over to him. You look nervous, I teased. I'm not nervous, he said. I'm in awe. You did all of this. You built this from nothing. I had help, I said, looking at him, but he smiled. You're the one who dreamed it. I just held the ladder. We stood together for a moment, watching the crowd, the space I'd designed, the people I loved, even the ones I'd had to fight to get there. It felt like a dream. Lin Wan, Xin Yan said, his voice dropping. I wanted to tell you something. I turned to face him. What? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught in my throat. I know this might be too soon, he said. And I know we haven't known each other that long. But I've never met anyone like you. Someone who fights for what she believes in. Someone who builds beauty out of pain. Someone who makes me want to be better every single day. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a small ruby, the color of the old hotel sign. Your grandfather said that every building should tell a story, he said. And I want my story to be the one where I get to spend the rest of my life with you. So I'm asking you, Lin Wan. Will you marry me? The room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. My mother had her hand over her mouth. My brother was grinning. Even Lin Chi had tears in her eyes. I looked at Shen Yan, at the man who had shown up when I was at my lowest and never once made me feel like I was less than I was. The man who had helped me build a dream that my grandfather would have been proud of. Yes, I said, my voice breaking. Yes, Almaru. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and the room erupted into applause. He pulled me into his arms and kissed me, right there in front of everyone, and I kissed him back like it was the most natural thing in the world. When we pulled apart, I looked up at him, my heart full to bursting. You know, I said, laughing through my tears, you just made this the best grand opening ever. I had to top the wonton somehow, he said, grinning, and I kissed him again, because I could. Because this was my life now, messy and beautiful and entirely my own. I walked over to the plaque by the entrance and placed my hand on it. I did it, Grandpa, I whispered. And I found someone worth keeping. The afternoon sun streamed through the skylights, casting golden light across the room. My family was laughing and talking and for once, not fighting. My future husband was standing beside me, his arm around my waist. And the building I designed stood all around us, solid and real and alive. It was the beginning of the rest of my life, and it was perfect. Thank you so much for reading Lin Wan's journey. If this story made you smile, cry, or want to build something of your own, drop a comment and let me know. I'd love to write more about this universe. Who knows what other stories are waiting to be told. Subscribe now so you never miss an update. The next adventure is just around the corner, and I promise it'll be worth the wait. Ring Book Sparkles.